In step 7.4, if you had a graph with, let's say, a result for 3 scenarios, and you wanted to get the same graph for a 4th scenario, or for an extra service or an extra result, your only option was to start again and draw the same graph with everything you selected before and with some more things, because it was not possible to actually manipulate what was on the graph. You could remove things, but you couldn't add anything. So a major improvement with STEM 7.5 is the ability to modify a graph in situ. And so there will be an extra menu command up here to add series to an existing graph. It's not there yet. And you will be able to select various elements of the graph to modify them. You'll be able to right-click an individual series to remove it from the graph. We're going to look at this in PowerPoint in a minute so you can understand how it looks. There'll also be a remove series option on the main menu, because there'll be a dialog where you can actually choose which series you want to remove. And most usefully, there will be options that allow you to change what's actually on the graph. So you can add some things, remove some things, just update it. So you can have a graph, and then you can style it, and then you can change it to be something else without losing all the formatting you've done. And if you want to change what you can see on the legend, there'll be a right-click option there to change the selections, and you'll even be able to do the same thing on the elements of the minor title, where here it shows 1 service, it shows 1 result. Here you'll be able to right click to change that to something else, or you'll be able to right click on the legend to change which scenarios in this case you have selected. I'm going to switch to the PowerPoint, and let's just go through these in more detail. So add series will be an option on the graph menu, might even be on the right click for the graph as a whole, I'm not sure. And basically it'll take you to the same interface as you've already seen for drawing a new graph. There'll be a few slight changes in the sense that adding series, there won't be a separate graphs option, because obviously the idea is you're just adding series to the one graph you started on. But in all other respects, it will be the same interface where you're going to pick some elements, results and scenarios, a cube of data to add to the existing cube that the graph had, and that's pretty straightforward. Remove series, on the chart it says 1 at a time. The easy thing would be you'd right click one of the lines on the graph and you'd go remove series. In principle it could just take it away, but in fact what it does, it will take you to a remove series dialog, where if you've come from one series it will highlight it in the list, but this gives you the option to actually remove several in one go, and then you can just click OK and it'll all be taken off together. There are also 2 options here which will be too small to read, but they say select 0 value, select unavailable. And basically if you've drawn a graph for a certain combination of elements and results and scenarios, it could be that there are some elements that never generate a certain kind of cost, in which case you might decide to always remove those from the graph. There's also a option to remove all the ones that are unavailable, and that tends to only be relevant if you're doing cost allocation, where there may be no cost allocated from resource to a particular service because they're not connected. Those options here permanently remove the series from the graph, and they're distinct from the formatting options with a similar name, which we haven't seen yet, but which allow you to have the graph temporarily suppress series which are either 0 or unavailable. But the difference is that as a formatting option, it still has the series there, it just chooses whether to show them, whereas when you go remove series and you do it this way, it actually removes them from the graph altogether, and they won't come back even if the results are subsequently non-zero or subsequently available. For me, the most exciting thing is the ability to change what's there on the existing graph. So there will be a change selections command, and the easiest thing is to consider what happens with the legend. So if you right click the legend, you'll have the option to go change selections, and what it will do is it will go to the same interface, again the same drawing interface, but it will go to the first tab of that interface, which is reflected in the legend. So in this case, this legend is showing me 3 different results, and so if I did change selections here, it would take me to the results tab of the dialog, And yeah, at its simplest, I could add some results, remove some results, click OK, and it would simply update the graph without changing any of the other selections. They will be assumed to be the same. If your graph has every combination implied, so if for every element and every result and every scenario it has all the possible combinations, then it's obvious how this should work. Because of the remove series command and because of the add series command, it's possible to have a sparse set of series where you don't have every possible combination. In that case, then when I do a change selections, and if I go to the results tab, it will show me everything which is every result which is present in at least one series on the graph. So you have to understand that if it's not sparse, there will be for a given result, it might not be present for every element and every scenario, but as long as it's available for one, it will appear in the dialog. And the design of this says that if you have those three results, then if you don't touch them, then if they are currently sparse, i.e. there are gaps for certain elements or certain scenarios, it will preserve those gaps. But if you add a new result, it will give you all the possible combinations for those, for the new results. And we haven't done it yet, but there will be a crosstab option to reinstate the cube. By crosstab, what I mean is there will be an option that appears regardless of which tab you're in, like the show graph as table option, and it'll be there to say, actually, I'd like to go back to having all the possible combinations that were implied by the selections I can see. There will also be an option to create a separate graph, so I could go to the legend, right click and do change selections, and I could pick two different results, and if I just do OK, this graph will change to be those results. But if I were to do create a separate graph, then it would leave this graph in situ, but it would then clone it with the different selections that I made at that time. So just to show how that would work, it would be as if I was looking at, so in this case, this graph here has three scenarios, and what you'd have to imagine is that if I went here and did change selections, it would put me into the drawing interface, and it would put me onto the scenarios tab, and it would put me onto the scenarios tab with those three already selected. And basically I could then choose to remove one or to add some more. And basically for all the ones that are currently here, if there are not every possible element and or result to go with those scenarios, it will leave the sparseness unchanged. But if I add, for example, let's say I add the working model, then what it'll do is it will add all the possible combinations of currently selected elements and results for the working model. And basically the bit about a separate graph is if I just do OK, it will just update the graph in situ. Whereas if you imagine this extra option down here somewhere, which will be called something like, what did I say? It will be called something like reinstate cube. So if there was a reinstate cube option here, then what it would do is for all of these scenarios, it would make sure that it had every combination of the selected elements and the selected results, rather than however sparse it was previously. Okay, so that's how you go about doing it from the legend, and there would be the same facility to right-click the common items in the minor title. So again, on my chart here, it would be that if I were to right-click where it says DSL access, that's the service name. So that would take me into the drawing interface, but on the elements tab, I could change the element, just do OK, and it would just update in situ, or any of the other more complicated things. And similarly, I could right-click where it says connections, and that's the result, and it would take me into the result dialog, sorry, the results tab, and again I could pick a different result or results, and then it would update the graph accordingly. So I've explained change selections in the context of right-clicking something which indicates the selection on the graph, either the legend or the minor title. Obviously, there's no reason why you wouldn't have a change selections command actually on the graph menu itself, because the change selections can at its most general, just take you to the beginning of the drawing interface and let you essentially review what you did when you first drew it. And the same comments about preserving the sparseness would apply. Which I think is enough to explain how that's going to work. So we'll stop there.